Hey guys, Mike and Matt, IronTrap Garage Podcast, coming to you live for our second audio only
Yep,
ever.
and Moon.
And Moon, yeah.
You might hear him click-clacking or panting in the mic throughout.
Yes.
And he's currently on the ground, but...
That's changed 5 times since we sat down and we just started.
So, anything new we need to talk about?
So, big thing is Carlisle and Hershey are in like a week and a half.
Yep.
So, Carlisle spaces are N3 through 6, and Hershey spaces are C4T 25 to 27. Did I get all those correct?
I think. I usually mess up the 25 to 7. I can never remember if it's 24 to 6 or what it is.
We're in row C4T. You'll see the big banners, light pole 33 at Hershey. Come find us. I've been in the process of pricing stuff. We're going to have a lot of stuff to bring. So if you come to Carlisle and Hershey, be sure to check our booth again for Hershey because there'll probably be some new stuff available.
Yeah, we usually bring sort of the same stuff, but Hershey, we definitely step up our game, and we will bring
a little bit nicer stuff.
Sometimes I pull some stuff off my own shelves or collection just to put there because there's stuff that I'm kind of like, well, maybe I'd sell it, or if it's sold for top dollar, I might consider letting it go.
Yep.
The other thing is Steve is currently downstairs giving a once-over on what was previously known as Dad's Daily. My dad and I kind of talked about it recently, and he hasn't driven the car hardly at all.
He's only driven it like once or twice, right?
Yeah, not much. Basically to get lunch and some stuff like that. But the big problem is when we started building my dad's car, he was living in Florida. So he was coming up here in the summers for the whole summer, and he would be living maybe 20 minutes from us. So he was here like a lot. So the idea was that he would drive that car in the summers while he was living here, while he was staying here from Florida, and he could leave. He would have that car to run around in. Well, then during us kind of putting on the road, he changed his mind and decided to move to Delaware and sell his place in Florida and get rid of his camper fifth wheel setup he had here in PA and move to Delaware, which is great, but he is 3 hours away, depending on traffic, maybe more, down near the beach in Delaware. So what now has happened is he comes up for 1 or 2 days at a time, maybe once a month or twice a month. And usually when he comes up, he's trying to fit in visiting myself, helping us out, going to visit my brother and seeing the grandkids and all that. And like he just drives a car up here and he has a car already. So it's kind of like, it's not very practical. I've been paying insurance on the car for years now. I really only drive it in the winter and like the colder months when I don't want to drive some of the other cars. So we're going to be putting it up for sale as a still work in progress. The car still it's very reliable. You can drive it, no problem. There's just stuff because it's an old, like a lot of these cars, it was an old street rod or hot rod built back in the day. So there's still a list of things that could be better on the car. But as of now, I've driven it an hour plus from home each way. And, driving around, it's been really no issues at all. It's still rough around the edges.
We could put it on Facebook Marketplace before Carlisle, or...
I don't know. I hate Facebook Marketplace.
Well, I'd be putting it on Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah, do you really want to deal with it? Maybe.
If we could sell before Carlisle, that'd be fantastic.
So anyways, anybody that's listening, we're going to start hinting at it in some video and obviously in these podcasts. So if you have any interest, it's a very affordable for what you're getting. It's going to be very affordable. Sub $10,000 car. It
was amazing. We moved it this morning for the first time in... How long?
Since probably March or April, and it
fired right up. Battery wasn't dead. Cranked over, fired up, moved, no problem.
Yeah, nice having a brand new Holly. Shout out to Holly.
Yeah.
4-barrel on it that's brand new. That everything works and it doesn't leak down and all that stuff. So it's a good car. It's just with all the cars we have currently juggling and stuff that's getting ready. We got a sedan delivery that now is my new flame. So that thing I'm hot and heavy on, I want to get it driving. So soon we're going to need a space for that.
And with the green car up here and the sedan delivery, it's full.
Yes. So something needs to go. And that car is probably the one that I have the least attachment to. So sad to say, I think if I ever build something for my father, it could be something a little newer that maybe he would, I don't know, he'd want to be more comfortable in driving. He kind of forgot what it's like to drive a car with bias plies and that old. I don't even know if my dad's really ever had anything that old before, to be completely honest. So the little bit he drove it, it was just nothing but complaints because it's like, oh, it's wandering. I'm like, it's bias plies, Dad. Oh, the steering box is loose. I'm like, we tightened it up. That's just old steering.
It's just an old Ford.
It's just an old Ford. So anyways, that's our little spiel there. Come see us at Carlisle and Hershey. We'll have stuff, cars. We don't know what else we'll have.
Plenty of parts. We're a little light on merch, so apologies to anyone that's coming to buy a sweatshirt or a T-shirt. We're running a little low and didn't have a chance to get another order in before.
And we're going to, for Black Friday, holiday time, we're going to put a big order in after Hershey. Just too much stuff going on. And also, merch orders are quite expensive, and we don't really make that much money on it. So we made the decision to hold off on that purchase until after.
And I just started working on the calendar. So hopefully.
We got a bunch of emails about that.
So hopefully by the end of Hershey, I'll have a calendar finalized, and we'll work on getting some orders put in. So they'll be available. They'll be available before Black Friday, definitely.
We got some great photos this year. So it's going to be. I just posted one yesterday. It was a phenomenal photo of the sedan delivery with the green 32 in the background and big red and a new building. It's just like when you have a bunch of cool cars laying around, it's pretty easy to have.
I started making a list yesterday, and I was like, I had like 25 photos. It's like, well, I just need to decide what goes where, and we're good to go.
Yeah. So today's topic, a lot of these topics we've been doing are literally just come up from, I've mentioned before, from us going to events and talking to friends and talking amongst ourselves and reading the comments and videos. It kind of creates some discussion. So we a lot of these topics are just kind of pop up.
Oh, if there's something you'd like to hear, by all means, send us an email, message, whatever, however you'd like to reach us with a podcast topic, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, that would could be fun. So today, one that comes up quite often is, I'm probably going to make it a little more broad than we initially said, but like, how do we decide what we're going to do with a car that we buy? Say we buy a lot of cars and stuff. So people oftentimes ask us, how do we decide which car we're going to work on?
Why didn't we paint said car would be a giant question we get.
So, and that kind of has evolved from the comment of people saying, is a car too good to modify or hot rod, or, why would you pick this car to hot rod? The Green Roadster has stirred a lot of feelings in some people in the beginning. Now it's died down, but so that kind of is the same idea. Like, why would you do this to this car but not that car? And I've said it before in the channel where we've bought a car, the 39 Coupe we just had. I bought that car. We did kind of just going through on it, very minor modifications. I mean, it had a dual exhaust on it. I put a better dual exhaust, and we took a couple leaves out of the suspension to make it sit a little better, and like one size smaller front tire or bigger rear, I forget. So that car is a good example. We didn't really modify it very much.
No.
Why? So that's what kind of our topic is today, that we're doing in the audio-only podcast here. So do you think there's a car that's too good to be restored? I mean, to be modified or hot rodded?
No, I think every car is open for anything. Because even back in the day, people were turning Duesenbergs into race cars and that kind of stuff, and they were, the top of the line back in the day. I guess if it's like a one of one, it's kind of off limits, but at any point, I think you own the vehicle, you choose what you do with it. As long as you're not destroying it, like to the point it can't be returned to how it was. Like the Green Roadster, everything we've done to it can be easily be undone and returned to a stock Roadster.
Hey guys, it's Matt Clausen, your host of the All Automotive Podcast. I've been in the automotive industry for over 30 years. I've owned my own repair shop for the last 15 years. I was going to write a book, but I started this podcast instead. So come join me for my take on vehicle extended service contracts or what to look for when purchasing a used vehicle. Like and subscribe to the All Automotive Podcast. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening now.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. I think significance of the car and originality is what the two factors for me are. So
Yeah.
obviously, kind of like you hinted to, if it was a, the Duesenberg that they've only made 3 of,
Or the very first Model A that
yeah,
Henry Ford produced.
or I'm not really into changing cars too much from what they were. So if we're talking hot rods, if you find the cover car of Hot Rod from '55, turning that into a Boyd style street rod is kind of a shame, because it's changing the identity of what the car was. And I also kind of broadened my scope into, and that's where we talk about the 39. Original cars are only original once.
Yep.
So taking a car that is 100% never restored, never apart, and just cutting it apart and changing what it is, those cars you've noticed over the years, I've strayed from those cars. Beautiful was a good example. While that car was really beat up and probably a lot of people would have cut it up, we tried to keep it kind of how it was. Yep. And didn't modify it super heavily. That car, I think, was open for mild modifications, but just to me, I felt like that car staying as kind of a full fendered, unchopped car was ideal. The 39 was a good example for that. So some of those cars, I think that is the case, but you also have to look at the condition of the car. I mean, if it's got rot in the car and it's all original, but there's rust and rot somewhere on the car, then if somebody was restoring the car, they'd have to cut that out and redo it anyway.
So you're saying restoration is kind of like hot rodding?
A little bit. I mean, I think restoration, we poke fun a lot, but the restoration guys have no problem with taking a car that was hot rodded and returning it back to stock. So each car has its place in history or time, and I just think the original cars that are 100% untouched, that's not the car that
you turn into a Bonneville land speed car.
Cutting that into doing a Bonneville chop or a Rolling Bones type car, and you started with a car that was like a 20,000 mile 32 3-window, like I would probably hesitate. Other people would not.
I can understand why they do it, though, because it's a nice, clean body. There's nothing you have to fix. It's a straight, basically perfect car. I understand it. I may not agree with it, but I understand the thought process, because there's a lot of guys that do that we're sitting right next to the 39 Merc. There's a lot of guys in California that buy insanely nice, low-mileage original Mercs to chop because they're perfectly straight. They don't have a panel smashed in on them. They're just cut them, they're good to go. Yeah,
and that's the idea with my Mercury. I want to modify it, but it is not as perfect. It is nice. That car is borderline for me.
There is rust in the drip rails.
The drip rails are all rotted out on it. Mice made nest in the headliner, and no longer I've owned the car, the bigger the rust even being stored indoors. It's growing in the drip rails. So that is the type of rust that, unfortunately, you have to cut into the car to fix regardless. You have to fully cut into it. So, yes, I could drive it as is, but I get it. But I think any car, there's still a lot of these cars out there. So even that 39 Mercury or beautiful, the 34.5 window, like there's tons of those cars out there. So the ones that we've had are not that. The 39 Coupe was pretty exceptional.
Yes.
But like beautiful was not exceptional. It was banged up. The old lady had banged it all up, and I stripped the multiple layers of paint off, but the paint underneath did not fare very well. So it had a great look if you're into patina and the age of a car like that, but it didn't fare well, whereas the 39 Coupe fared a lot better, and when you polish that original paint up, it was pretty sweet. So, but yeah, the Mercury is like, I think some of it too is obviously value. Like a Duesenberg we're talking about, I would have a hard time
affording one.
Yeah, but if I was a billion or millionaire and was buying Duesenbergs, it's hard because you still do look at this stuff as investments a little bit.
Yeah.
As much as I try not to think that way, you also don't want to take something and just turn it into a pile of shit. So if you had a Duesenberg, that is the type of car that the value is going to go down if you start hot rodding or modifying it. Whereas these old Fords and Mercurys and Lincolns right now, the money is actually in
Hot rods
and customs. So me chopping the top on my Mercury is going to make the car significantly more valuable. Us hot rodding in a period correct way, that green 32 Roadster, has actually made the car significantly more valuable and easier to sell. I don't go into it thinking that way, but it's always in the back of your mind that if I'm going to sell the car in 2 months or 25 years, I don't want it to be like a, you're underwater in it, at least with me. So I think that's the thing. The rarity of the car we have to look at. And a lot of people, like on the internet and some of the restoration guys that are crying about some of the early Ford stuff, there's so much of it out there. It's not like there's so many 32 Fords out there that I don't think we're, and all the work, like you said, can be reversed. Even the chopped cars, if you want to restore a chopped car, you can unchop it. It's not, it's just a reverse of.
There's people that sell their pieces on the internet.
Yeah.
And you talked about your newest Flame, the Sedan Delivery. They only made like 9,000 of them. Mm-hmm. That's not one we're gonna turn it into more of a hot rod. There's a video coming out in the future where we put a drop axle on it and some different tires. If you follow us on social media, there were some photos posted already.
Yep.
All that can be undone. We're not going to cut it apart and chop it and do some weird stuff with the body. And
I think that's the part that people get really upset about. Like, nothing that we're doing to some of these original cars is any different than what someone would have done back when, like how many original, when we're talking the Ford world, early Fords, you go to early V8 meets or Model A meets or different early shows for quote unquote original cars, and you see a guy and it has his hood open and there's a 40 Ford that's got fin heads and 3 carburetors. But that guy is a restoration guy, but it's okay because the rest of the car looks original.
Yeah.
We're doing the same stuff. I just think I make my cars sit better and look better. Like a lot of those guys, it still sits kind of goofy, and then it's got like the hot rod engine. So it's like we're just going a little bit further, and maybe we put, more drastic tire differences, rake and stuff like that. But yeah, that 34 Sedan Delivery, it's like we're putting 40 Ford wheels on it. Or putting Baby Moon hubcaps on it.
We've talked about before. It's like a day 2 with muscle car.
Yes, it's like a hot rod shop would have done if they, or parts speed shop would have done, and they wanted a delivery vehicle. It's
exactly.
Like we're gonna put a hopped up 59 AB in it because the engine that's in it is tired.
Is it this one right here that's sitting next to
us? No, it's one over.
Oh,
but
okay.
yeah, it's upstairs here. But again, it's a mild engine. We're not cutting zoomies out the hood. We're not cutting it up and turning it into some kind of cab over abstract piece of art.
We're not taking a 4-door and turning it into a ute.
Yes, we're not doing anything. Yeah, we're not going to cut the roof on the Sedan Delivery and turn it into some model of Ford that was never made. So that stuff.
I think everyone can get the hint that we're dropping right there.
Yeah, so we're not wrecking cars in that manner.
Yes.
So you could easily change a lot of this stuff back. I think there's definitely a lot of the market with restoration has gone down, so there is a lot of people buying restored cars. Come on, Moon. You want to come up? Come on.
What's up, buddy?
Come here. Here.
Hi.
Good job. Can you be quiet? So I think there's a lot like we did with the Green Roadster. There's a lot of that going on where people are buying older restored cars. They maybe are showing some age, but are still very nice, and then they're hot rodding them. And at this point, I don't really have a problem with that because that car's not original anymore. Sure, it looks original, but a lot of times the paint has age to it. The Green Roadster in photos looks phenomenal, but in person, there's chips, there's spider cracking in the paint here and there.
The paint doesn't perfectly match either.
Yeah, it was an amateur restoration as much as people like to cry just because it was at a museum. Museum cars do not equal concourse cars.
No.
That's another thing I think people don't understand. I've seen some pretty terrible stuff at museums.
Majority of museum cars are donated from people, and
Yep.
a lot of times they're not great. They're just donated. That's all.
Yes, so
It's not like the museum is curating their collection of. When they get big enough, they do to a
Yeah.
point. But a lot of times, museums will take any donation they can get because it looks
Yeah.
good in their museum.
and if it fits their
Motif.
their mission
Yeah.
statement, they may keep a car because it's the example they have that matches that. But so that's a I think people don't understand that not just because the internet it looks nice, that doesn't mean it's as nice in person. So, but I don't know. I mean, it's mainly these earlier cars that people seem to get upset about.
Yeah.
You look at the muscle car stuff, and it's like the stuff's so modified. Most of it are day two is.
Not even day two. I mean, so many of those muscle cars are now turned into like drag cars or into pro touring cars, and no one seems to really get upset when they're rolling across the block at Mecum and they're pro touring or.
Yeah,
It's such a weird disconnect between the 30s and 40s stuff into the 60s and 70s. There's just even the 50s stuff. There's a lot of guys that are turning those 50s cars into customs or pro touring, and no one seems to get their panties in a bunch.
I think it's the same idea. Those cars there's a lot of them, and it goes back to the value thing. A 50s Mopar, like a 4950 Dodge or whatever, most people aren't going to have an issue with it modifying it. But a Duesenberg, okay, that's a $1 million car or multi-million-dollar car, and by chopping the roof on it is now going to be worth nothing compared to that. So whereas the Dodge is going to be worth a lot more. So
do you think people hold the Fords in a higher regard for us modifying them because they were so popular? Like 50s Mopars, I don't think were ever that popular as early Fords have always been like
they're kind of
the thing everyone wanted. Even from the 40s on, everyone wanted one. Do you think that's why people get upset when they get modified?
No, I just think I think there's a lot more Ford fanatics than any other because there's so many more of them and so much more popular. There's more people that feel strongly about what's done to them, and I just think that it's interesting because most of the people 99% of the people that are crying about the modification or changing of early Fords, you actually talk to them one-on-one, and almost every single one I know personally, they either were a hot rodder,
Yep.
and they talk about all the stuff when they were kids they cut up and modified and did this and that, and it's great fun stories, but now it's not okay for younger people to do that. Or they also have street rods or modified cars too, and it's just it's okay for them to do it in their way, but not how.
Or it's only okay to do it to this year car, but 32s are off limits. You can't hot rod them, but you can hot rod a Model A, but 32 can't be hot rodded because it's coveted.
That happened with the green Roadster. A gentleman that owned that Roadster as an original car before the person who owned it when we got it had sent us an email and was kind of angry with us when I said that I was going to modify the car and make it into an old school hot rod and blah blah blah. And I kind of was poking fun about how it used to be a hot rod, and I was kind of poking the bear a little bit, making some comments of somebody ruined a traditional hot rod or an old school hot rod. And then he said, basically in so many words, that we only had an issue with us modifying that car because he had so many memories with that car, but he has a straight rod.
Yeah.
So it's like that was just saying you can only modify a car that I say is okay because
I didn't own it and have memories in it.
Yeah. So that's where it's, and I get that. I've sold cars over the years that got changed or you don't like the outcome of the car, and it does make you a little upset. So I can respect that.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of people, the internet is a sounding board now, and old guys are even worse with it because they don't realize, I think, that the things they say go out to millions and millions of people.
Yeah.
They say stuff you're like, ooh, Grandpa, you should somebody keep Grandpa's keyboard away from him. But so I don't know, people ask us how do we decide what to do with back to kind of the beginning of this. So how we choose which car we're going to save or work on, or why don't we? We get questions all the time. What happened to X car? One recently I've been seeing is the 36.3 window that we got in Oregon. Why didn't we? What's going on with that car? I can't wait to see you build it. Whatever. And so some of these cars, why do we choose to work on it versus another one, or why do we choose to not paint one? I don't know if you have a thought.
Oh, well, the not painting one's pretty easy because you kind of take away the personality of the car when you paint it. Like the DeLorean Roadster is a good way to put it because there's there's a ton of people out there with a perfect black 32 Roadster. It is the iconic look and everything. If you just painted that car, it would blend in with all the other black 32 Roadsters. Now, obviously, the hood helps it stand out a little bit, and the tail pan. But other than that, it looks like every shiny black 32 Roadster there is. The Stroll car, it's a odd color, but you can see the original A gas on the door from when it was drag raced, and it's like everyone can have a nice shiny car, but the character of the paint not being perfect adds to the personality of the car. You could see that the Stroll car was an old drag car back in the day. We didn't fake that. It's how it was. And it's like that. It's a weird dance with the same as modifying or not modifying. You have to look at the car and let the car speak to you, which we do a ton before we do anything. Decide, well, this one we don't want to paint because it's the character of the car, the way it looks.
Yeah, like the Stroll car was a good example.
Sounds like someone's cutting down a tree. I don't think that's Steve.
I hope not. He's supposed to be working on taking the engine out of the sedan delivery, and it sounds like he's running a body saw.
Unless he's cutting the exhaust tubing.
He might be. I'm gonna just ignore that. Steve might be cutting the sedan delivery in half right now. So that whole statement about
we had to cut the whole roof off to get the engine out.
Yeah. We sometimes you leave Steve on.
It snowballs.
Yeah, it can happen. So yeah, the Stroll car was a good example of that. Car was covered in black primer, so I was going to paint that car or do something that wasn't black primer when I got it. And then as I started stripping the black primer, I found that cool green paint underneath, or more of it, and then we saw the letters, and then it started coming out, and it's kind of like we then blended paint in where we did rust repair, and that car was borderline on getting it repainted. I think some of the cars, for me, the look of the age of the paint and the look of it, sometimes it's too far gone. So the 38 convertible, unfortunately, the gentleman who had it last, or one of the people that had it last, they went and red oxide spot primed or brushed on red oxide primer every little spot where there was a paint chip, and it's just a splotchy mess. So,
and the original paint there was no primer.
Yeah.
So it's whatever original paint is left is also flaking off the bare metal.
Yes. The more I drive it, the more
the front end looks really bad right now.
Taking it down the highway at 65 miles an hour, the paint has been getting knocked off the front end, which is good. It's helping us. So like that car is a good example. There's so much damage to the car that I need to fix that requires going back to bare metal. The paint condition is not really a good one to begin with. It doesn't have a pleasing, to me, shitty look. Although we've had people comment in pictures that they like the look of the car, so it's everybody's opinion is different there. But for me, I wanted to modify the car some more. I needed to fix some old damage. We're going to be opening up too many bare metal areas for me to keep this thing looking like that. So that car would get painted.
It's also what the end goal is.
Yeah.
Like the Stroll car, you were building a very down and dirty traditional style hot rod, where the 38 is more of a custom, which would have had a nice paint job.
Yeah, and the Stroll car was, it's a survivor type East Coast car, so I was following a mold of what it would have looked like possibly, or sort of looked like back when it was on the road or, being drag raced. So the 38 was kind of like I think it was just a modified car. It was never like a full custom, or, it was kind of just an old car. So they had a different engine in it, but it wasn't like it was lowered or anything like that. I think it was just some kids or young men were modifying it, and it never got very far or wasn't done very well. So we're taking it and making it better than it was and making it into a more elegant custom. So that car, again, because I'm changing so much, it's going to need to be painted. So we make the decisions on what car we're working on by, I guess, if it's a lot of it's me. If I fall in love with the car, then all of a sudden we go down a rabbit hole with it, whereas other ones were kind of like. But a lot of these cars we get in, we kind of decide from the beginning, okay, this car, we're just going to get it. We've sold a bunch of project cars in the last handful of years where it's like we got it and the car was kind of a mess. A lot of the secret of everything we do is the vision. I've found over the years a lot of people don't have the vision, and I've been able to buy cars throughout my whole life that a lot of people will turn their nose at. The DeLorean Roadster is my biggest feather in my cap because there was an entire thread dedicated on the ham, and people talking on the internet how terrible of a purchase that car was and how it was a piece of shit and why would anybody buy that thing.
That was my favorite thread to read while it was going on. It was quite funny.
So there were, a lot of that stuff going around in that type of car, and I've had that happen to me over and over and over again my whole life since I've been in old cars, whether it was German cars or American cars. I'd buy something and somebody would go, "That thing is terrible. Why would you fix that car? Why would you put that car on the road?" Or
did you get that with the blue car when you saved that? The one that was on the scrap pile?
People were just like, "Dude, like that thing is like the floor was like ripped open like a sardine can on it because they picked it up with like a forklift and like punctured the floor and it was torn up, and it was just one of those deals." That car was scary. And when I was fixing the early water-cooled Volkswagens earlier in my life, when I was doing that and doing forums, I was one of the few people that was taking on cars that were like, people were like, okay, it needs a whole floor, or like half the floor is gone, because you could buy cars that were nice back then, so why would you start with a car that was
they weren't really worth anything even nice.
Yeah, so again, I didn't have any money, so I was buying cars for $200, $500, $1,000, and then was fixing them. So, but for me, it always went back to the look. So all these cars are the same thing. We get a car, or we get a chance to buy a car, and I'll go, ooh, that thing, this little change, or I think the primer will come off and the original paint's underneath. And so like the 39 Coupe, when we first went to look at that in person and walked in the garage, I was like, instinct was like, this is a good one. Like you could tell it was unmessed with for the most part. You could tell that the shine would come back, and I could tell that like where they had brush painted in certain spots, it wasn't done over the whole car, so it wouldn't be bad to wet sand it out. So like those cars, you can pick them because you can tell. And we have these project cars we've gotten where it's like a body. We got that one from Jersey that was like a Coopster, Model A Coopster, and the gentleman that owned it kind of started modifying it. He was going in the right direction, but he wasn't able to live long enough to see it through. And we could kind of see where he was going with it. And we're like, okay, if we just do a handful of little things to make it sit right, get an engine in it, and get it a little less scary for the next guy, it's a pretty cool car. So that's what we did. Put another engine in it, got it sitting a little better. We spent a couple days of work on it, or a day's work.
Yeah.
And somebody could see the vision easier, and we were able to pass the car on, make a small amount of money on it, and it got to live on with somebody else. So a lot of cars we do that with, where we buy it, we know what it's going to take to make it more palatable for people. And
sometimes it's just different color wheels.
Yes. Yeah, the
offensive. Well, for whatever reason, early Ford dudes love putting weird color wheels on their black.
Well, I think it was an option,
but
yeah.
It looks terrible.
Yeah.
Like that 35 two-door sedan that you bought that had like it was a black car with lime green wheels.
Yeah, so a lot of that stuff, you just change a couple of things, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, that's not as ugly as I would have thought. And it's not that people can't see it. It just they maybe have a little harder of a time seeing it.
It makes it easier to digest.
Yeah. So that's a lot of what we've been doing is just, you look at a car, and when I see photos of it or we see it in person, we can kind of make the decision. So the sedan delivery that we just got, I was studying the photos ahead of buying that car, and I could see that the cowl, the firewall had original black paint on it or old black paint that was shiny, and the rest of the car was like dull, grayed out primer. And it's like, okay, well, if the firewall and the cowl look that good, I bet most of the rest of the car looks that good. And there's, we saw it in person, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you could see where it's chipping off on the fenders, and it's shiny black paint under it. It's like, okay, this one's worth. And then usually I test it as soon as we get a car, that car, for instance, I got out the 1500 grit and 1000 grit and wet sanded a little area and some steel wool and some other areas just to test it. It's like the 1500 grit wet and 1000 grit wet instantly broke through the primer, and it's like there's nice smooth black paint underneath it. It's like, ooh, I think this one's going to come up. So that's the car kind of tells you, but that's how we make those decisions. Just you got to see the car, and I always urge people, when you get a car that has some age to it or history to it, just before you start cutting it apart or spray bomb the whole thing gray primer, just look at it and think about, what is the best for the car. And I get it. Some people want to restore it and sand it all down, but there's been a lot of cars we've seen that unfortunately I think would have been better as a survivor car, and people just instantly do a crazy resto to it. And yes, you can't deny at the end the car looks beautiful, but it would have been kind of neat to see the car in its original type form for a little while. So that's been a big discussion, like recently with, was it the Uncertain T?
Yep.
That car was found. It's a little rough around the edges, but it's survivor. And it was showed at the Grand National Show as found. And there's been a lot of discussion I've seen on the internet of people like, do you save it, do you whatever? And Galpin that has it, and Dave Schutten, they're discussing on the internet. You see talk a little bit of what they're planning.
Which I can understand it, because that car's gone through like 7 different revisions. Same with like the Cookie T.
Yeah, that car
T was found. It was in that weird Jim Street version. I think it's much better now back in the original version.
Yes, I think. But it would have been neat, that car is a good example, to maybe bring it out a little bit in
that one
as
didn't
found
get shown
condition.
at all. Have there been any cars besides the Uncertainty recently that have been found that were like real historic cars?
I don't know. Nothing like crazy. I think it's the cars that are really famous like that are kind of neat to see. But I think it's kind of cool to see cars. I wish we would normalize the process of, if you find a historic car or a survivor car, bringing it out like as found. I think that's fascinating, because like if I could see it doesn't matter if it's even a famous car, you see some old hot rod. Like when we went to California and we were doing some shop tours and stuff, some of these shops, they have a car that a customer brought in, and it's like as found, and they're going to revive it or restore it, and we get to see it. You get to see it in the shop.
Strokers has that Model A.
Stokers
has that Model A Roadster that's like that.
Yeah, so that car is kind of like as found, as basically as it was, so that's kind of really neat to crawl around and look at and see. And, before it's been touched up or changed or, fixed. I just think that's fascinating. So it'd be really cool to start seeing more of that, where people, even if just for the first, one season or 2 or 3 big shows, you take it out, trailer it there, put it at the show, and just check it out. And I just think it's fascinating. So it'd be cool to see that more. We don't necessarily do that with all of ours because we have so many.
And we do very little. We actually do very little shows that we take cars to. So
yeah, I don't. We're just so busy. Yeah, so it'd be cool to start seeing more of cars as found kind of brought out to shows.
Maybe next year at because Wheels of Time is kind of the only show we bring multiple cars to. Maybe next year we'll find something in the summertime and we'll leave it as found to take to the show. We'll have to leave it outside the tent because it's probably going to be stinky and smell like mouse piss. Leave it as far away from the table as we sit so it doesn't stink us out.
People will know it's our booth because the cars smell like that. Yeah, that would be kind of neat. So that's...
we'll have to save that as a mental note for the show next year.
But, yeah, so that's kind of the idea with a lot of them is how the car looks. Like we have the Lincoln Continental that we got at the same estate where the 39 Ford was. That car... the Lincoln Continentals, if they're not restored, are worth not a lot of money. They're pretty. The value drops immediately on those cars if they look rough, and like that car's not super rough rust wise. It's not terrible, but it just doesn't have a good look to it. So if we went to sell that car, you're gonna get $5,000 for it or something, and
It's crazy how little value they have.
but if we pulled the running V12 engine out of it, we could probably get $3,000 or $5,000 for it. So it's like that car for me. Now that we've sold some parts and we sold the 39 Ford, that car is very affordable, nearly no in-pocket cost for us for the car. That it's like, okay, well, it's kind of a blank slate. We could have some fun with it, modify it some. We're not starting with a car that's super original and untouched. It's already had stuff modified on it from original. It's 18 different shades of terrible, and yeah, so
It's been modified. It's had the hood emblem and all that's been shaved. So it's been hot rodded. So all we're doing is refining it.
yeah, same.
All we're
idea.
doing is lying to ourselves in different ways. That's all.
Yeah, it's just what we need to tell ourselves or everyone else to make it
Makes
seem
feel
okay.
good, yeah.
But yeah, so that's a car is a good example of in its current state, it's not really worth that much. For us to restore that car, if we were restoration people, that car would cost.
You'd have over $100,000 into restoring a $60,000 car.
Yes. So for us, we could have a lot more fun messing around with it, modifying it. And if you make it a beautiful custom that is timeless and period correct kind of deal, that car will probably be worth significantly more than if it was restored. And it's still going to look like a Continental. It's just going to be, done
Better.
more in a 40s or 50s era, customizer would have done it. So that's kind of the idea for some of these cars is that if it's a good platform, if that's why I've strayed away from buying some cars over the years. Like if that car was a super nice survivor car or was maybe a restored car that we bought, I may not do that because, the modifications I'd like to do that car are more than just bolting things on.
Yeah.
So I'd like to cut into that car. So starting with a car with good paint, I might have to think twice about it because it's, might be better to pass on to somebody else. But in its current condition, the top's no good, the seats are no good, the dash is incomplete. It's just got mismatched parts on it that aren't, what came on it originally. So for me, it doesn't seem like a big deal. Like we've talked about earlier, a lot of people don't care. There's a lot of shops, high-end shops that are taking whatever a customer will bring, and they'll, dollar for dollar, it's going to save the customer money if they bring a shop a beautiful restored car because they're not doing all kinds of repair work to make the car solid to then customize it. They can just pay for the chop top or the, whatever modifications, roll the old chassis out and roll a new chassis under it. And,
The Sweetheart Roadster is the perfect example of that.
yeah.
I mean, you spent like a year just getting it to the point where you could then modify it.
Yeah. Put sub rails in it and kind of returned it back to a stock configuration to then just start cutting all of that apart and start modifying it all and, throwing most of it away or selling a lot of it. So it's
understandable. I mean, if you had to pay someone to do all the work that you did to the Sweetheart Roadster just to get it to a point to then modify it, you'd have $500,000 into that car of all the random work if you paid a shop to do all of it.
And that's why you've noticed the channel evolve over the years, because when I bought that car, I wasn't finding as easily cars that were in, Model A Roadsters. I wasn't coming across good deals on Model A Roadsters or Model A Roadsters at all that were project cars that were, I should say, in my budget range at the time. Now, the more we've hunted for this stuff and I'm more in tune with, finding the stuff, nowadays me would have never bought that car. I would have bought a car that was much more solid, and I would have started with it from there. I would have done it totally different, but that's, as you get older, although, you learn this, and this is what the older guys, when I first started getting real heavy into early American cars, were always saying, like, why would you buy this? Start with a better car. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to how much money you have. I would have loved to buy a super solid, nice car and put it on the road, but I didn't have $10,000 to start with a nice one. Now that we have more stuff going on, I would buy, that green 32 Roadster was a good example. That was not a cheap car. It was affordable for what it was in the long run, but I had the money liquid.
2017 Matt would have never even thought about trying to buy
Oh my
it.
God, no, not at all. I mean, this stuff was all a dream. So,
Yeah.
now that we've got the money rolling with and have different cars to buy and sell and trade and all whatever, you're able to obtain that stuff. So, we've talked about in other videos of trading up and buying up, and whatever car you buy in the beginning doesn't have to be your car for the rest of your life. You can fix it up, put sweat equity into it, and then turn it around and sell it, and then you can step into that car that maybe you wanted or get another step closer. And once you start buying and selling and trading and getting stuff in your personal stash, it's easier to get a better car. But yeah, I get, if you get a guy that just wants a car and wants to take it to a shop and get it built a certain way better to buy a car that's at least is more solid.
Yeah.
I hesitate saying that because like the 36.3 window we had, Matt Snopik, that his shop that he has, they bought that car for a customer because his customer had him searching for a 36.3 window, and he basically said, well, at least the car he's buying from us, we knew what rust repair it needed because it had no paint. It was, what you saw is what you got. He was worried about, they were looking at cars that were maybe old restored cars or old street rotted cars, and what he was afraid as a body and paint guy he runs into often. He strips the car down to bare metal, and there's all kinds of, even a nice restored car, there's all kinds of patchwork where they just laid metal over metal and pop riveted it or stick welded
I thought
it.
restored cars were supposed to be the most pristine example available.
Yeah, newsflash. There's all different levels of restoration.
Most restorations have mud in them.
Yeah,
Lots of mud.
Everything has mud in it, but there's a lot of restorations that are done very poorly. And even though that gentleman might be a expert in early Ford knowledge, that doesn't mean that he was a good welder. So there's a lot of stuff where they stick welded or gas welded, and maybe it was done way back when that's what they had available, and there's some poor repairs. So Matt was kind of like, when I told him what we started talking about him buying this car for the customer, he was like, you know what, at least this car I know what I'm getting. I know I need to do floors. I know blah blah blah. But he was looking at cars that were $50,000 to $70,000. Then they were going to tear it down and turn it into what the customer wanted. And he was afraid that he buys a $50,000 shiny car, strips it down, and then tells the customer he's got $30,000 in rust repair to do because whoever else did it poorly or not to the quality. So he spent significantly less money on that project car so that it's built into the cost. So yes, in the end, the customer is going to end up with a $50,000 base.
Yep.
But they know what they got, and he's not doing double work by cutting apart somebody else's work. So I think that there is a sweet spot where I think there's a lot of cars when you're going to totally change a car, like buying a street rod, and you're going to totally strip it down to bare metal. You got to be careful of that because there's a lot of work sins that are hidden under putty and paint. Make it what it ain't.
I'd rather buy a rusty car that I know I need to do all the lower 2 inches of patch panels than buying a nice painted car and you strip it down and go, shit, I got to do 2 inches of lower rust repair now. I'd rather just know it going in than find out when you're halfway through the project. Or you have the chassis all done and nice and you're like, oh, we'll strip the body and paint it. Then you're like, there's like 3 months of rust repair I need to do now.
They pop riveted stop signs over the quarter panels.
Yep.
But my first experience with that similar situation was when I was younger and doing Volkswagens, and I was maybe 18, 19. My friend Nick and I used to share, we rented garages together, and I actually found locally an old Volkswagen Rabbit that was sitting in a garage, and it was, little old lady, and her husband and her towed it behind an RV, low mileage, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't have the money, so my friend bought. I found it, but he ended up buying it. And he got it back to our garage, and he started like sanding it to repaint it. And he found they forgot to mention that they towed it all over the East Coast in bad weather and to the beach and stuff. And the thing had rotted out in the rear quarters, and they had literally riveted like just whatever sheet metal they could find kicking around at the farm over it. And then they mudded it and had it resprayed in, say, the 80s. And so the paint looked okay. And he literally ended up cutting the car up because it was so bad and beyond his skill level. And I was kind of like, it blew me away because I almost bought the car. And for us at the time, as young men, it was probably like $2,000.
Yeah.
He paid for the car, and we were like, I remember he was devastated, and I was just like, holy crap. So now it like opened your eyes. Just because a car's shiny doesn't mean that it's nice underneath. And you have to be careful of that. So, the green 32, there's some of the work that was done during the restoration. I'm running my hand on the bottom side of the panel, and it's definitely, they didn't planish hammer and smooth the panel out super smooth. They welded in the patch and they mudded over it. And the car's held up over time, but like you can't expect it because it's shiny that it's
perfect.
It's perfect. So that's where I think there's that misconception, or people go into it blind, and then you just run into like all this extra time and money. So I think that's something to be careful of when you're shopping for these cars. You have to remember that a lot of these cars are nearing 100 years old, or at least are 60, 70 years old and older. And the number of people that have had that car over the years, there's a good likelihood there's some sort of work on it that is subpar.
100%.
Because you figure there was somebody back in, 1947 that had body shop do some repairs, and it was...
I mean, say the 39, in 49 it was 10 years old. Mm-hmm. I mean, think about a 10-year-old car now, how many people have worked on it or messed with it. I mean, there's 100 people could have touched that car, and you don't realize what they did. Or they took it to a body shop, and they took it to an Earl Shive type body shop where it was $50 for rust repair, and there's not good rust repair.
So yeah, I think that's kind of a good rundown about this topic. I think that you could discuss it for hours and hours and hours, but
I think we beat the dead horse hard enough.
Yeah, a little bit. I think we jumped around a bit, but we kind of touched on a few things. Like I said, the one thing we see a lot of questions is how do we decide what we work on, or when, or why did you choose this car to fix this car, and like the Plymouth people were really excited about, and we're going to sell that. And it's just like, it just doesn't do it for me. And it wasn't something that I was dying to have. So we passed it on, and we got it to run. We had our fun with it, and that was kind of it. So that's the main goal. If you guys haven't noticed, have fun with it. Don't take it too seriously. Buy what you want.
Do what you want.
Yeah. Do what you want.
Don't let the internet bully you into doing things to your car you don't want.
Yeah. Just have fun and drive it and do what you want when you want, and that's the goal. So that is our audio podcast for this week.
Again, if you guys like these, send us an email, leave us a review on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you're listening to this. We look at all those so we can tell if we're doing a good job or not. So.
Yeah, and thank you for the feedback. We've gotten a lot of people that have commented or even talked to us at shows or events that just said, I listen to the podcast, I enjoy it, whatever. And that's cool, because the podcasting literally makes us $0. There's like no way, unless you get huge and you're Rogan or something, you're not making money doing a podcast. It's just an extra thing for us it's bullshit sessions that we are trying not to put in the videos as much, so we're able to discuss it here on the podcast. And if you want to come here and hear us ramble, you can, versus the week in the life of me doing a little side tangent of something like that. So this is all side tangent.
Yes.
So thank you guys for following along. Make sure you subscribe and pass it around. And thank you guys. We'll catch you later.
See ya.